Welcome to the Bose 3 podcast. Here is your host, fresh off the campaign trail, John Bose.
Hey everyone, John Bose here. It is another Thursday night, so I have another great guest. Once again, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, bose3.com/subscribe. Tonight, I am here with Sean Costello, and we go way back. Way back. Sean, introduce yourself.
Sure, John. As soon as you ask me to do something, obviously I'm going to do it, so it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
See, you don't know not to answer the phone.
I know. After, 13 years, I haven't learned to not answer your phone calls. Well, it's good to be on with you. And
Thank you for coming on.
No, of course. And as you alluded to, John, you and I have known each other for a long time, since I was 14 years old, which is when I first started getting involved in political campaigns. I volunteered for the first time ever for a guy named Jim Cantwell.
I believe he was a state rep, right?
I believe he was, and now he works for a gentleman named Markey, I believe his name is. So, but of course, you were Jim's campaign manager, and you were telling me what to do when I was 14 years old and telling me where I was going to go knock on doors with the candidate.
Now, the thing about it that I think is important for people to understand, because this is, of course, about people who run first time for office, how did you get introduced to Jim?
So it's one of those funny things that just so happened to work out where my dad is friends with a guy named Kevin Cantwell.
The more popular Cantwell.
The far more popular Cantwell. And Kevin, of course, knows everybody, and one of those people is my dad. And Jim was running for the open seat when Frank Hines decided to leave, and Kevin called my dad one day and said, "Hey, listen, I remember you saying your son he's in high school now and he's interested in politics. Does he want to knock on doors with my brother?" And my dad said, let me find out, and asked me if I wanted to, and thank God I said yes, because I've been hooked ever since. But that day, Jim picked me up. It was pouring.
Downpour, right?
Downpour, yep. I'm sure you remember the story from when it happened, but his driver that day, coincidentally, was his good friend Josh Cutler, who's now a state representative too. But they picked me up. I was 14 years old in the back seat of Josh's Jeep. It was pouring out. I was petrified.
Two guys who've never met. You're
right,
now
exactly.
knocking on strangers'
I heard
doors.
Jim's name over and over again because it's Jim, and he had that base in town. And I was intimidated. I was petrified. I'm sitting in the back seat, and it's pouring out. I had no idea what was expected of me, and we parked on the side of the road, and Jim turned to me, and he said, "All right, let's go. First door." And got drenched and watched him go to work. It was really impressive to see the way he interacted with people, and the way people responded to him and discussed issues with him so openly, even in the pouring rain. They'd stand there and they'd talk to him about things, and that's kind of when I got inspired to
get involved.
Exactly, to continue to get involved with campaigns, because that's not something you see every day,
right.
And that's something that I think we need to see more of.
And then after that, the next time we worked together was at school.
Yes. So Jim, of course, got elected.
Now, mind you, you're still in high school.
I'm still in at this point. So Jim got elected, and then we did his re-election,
right.
Which I don't think he had an opponent in his first re-election. And but we still did some stuff. You guys kept me in the loop, which was really nice of you, to keep me involved and make me feel important as a high school student. And then I went off to Stonehill College. And my first year at Stonehill, you guys called me back for an organizing meeting for new Marshfield High School. There was a whole host of people led by the school committee, Marty Morrison, Carol Schrand, of course, Nancy Curry, and of course so many of you and Jim. And you guys called me back. You said, we need a new high school in Marshfield, and we need a young person to be involved with this.
Now, to be clear, the high school had been built in
1969.
So it was a little bit showing its grade.
It was. And there were accordion walls. I think everybody will remember there was rotting ceiling tile. It was just a bad facility. That's not conducive to 21st century education. We were in risk of losing our accreditation if we didn't do something about it.
So we got a group together.
Yep, we got a group together, and for some reason, beyond all explanation, you guys made me, a 19-year-old kid, the secretary of the committee, and you kept me in the loop on all of those things. And there I was once again in the war room with you and Jim and everybody else, and you guys were telling me where to go to knock on doors to spread the word about New Marshfield High School. You had me go on WATD. You had me do a couple more things, spoke at town meeting, and just one of those other things that continued to keep me involved in politics.
Keep you engaged.
Exactly.
You didn't go home.
I didn't. And then 2 years later, you called again, you were starting up your own initiative, and
Right.
you hired me to work for you and knock on
So
doors.
you've done pretty much every campaign job there is.
Pretty much everything that you've asked me to do, now that I think about it.
So you're doing field organizing for mayor's race in Boston.
Yes. Yep. Which your broadcast.
Yeah, so anyone who saw the Brian Muldoon video knows that, but anyone who wants to see it, Facebook ate it.
Watch it.
Go watch it. So, okay, so you do that campaign, then you come back and you run for office, right?
Yes. So I came back from college. I graduated from Stonehill in 2014, and I had decided. And you know what, John? We also skipped the Elizabeth Warren campaign.
Oh, we forgot that. Yeah.
There too, and I still vividly remember that night when she won. You and I were driving into the city to go to the victory party, and she came out and thanked everybody, and she had tears in her eyes, and she gave us both a hug. It was a really cool moment. And
you have a great picture.
I still have that picture from that night.
One of the few pictures that we got that actually came out. Everyone else has blurry.
Yep, I still have that picture, and
wasn't there? You got a ride to a poll for an 80-year-old woman?
Yeah, well, that was still to this day, and now I work for the government, and I try and help people on a daily basis with constituent services or with writing bills, but still to this day, that's one of the best memories that I have politically is towards the end of the day, it was like 2 hours left until polls closed, somebody from Plymouth called our office.
Well, no, it was Mike Firestone who was running the field operation.
That's exactly
and
it.
said, I got an 80-year-old woman
who needs a ride to the polls, and they couldn't find somebody to do it. And the woman had called a bunch of this. She was handicapped. She was wheelchair bound, and we made dozens and dozens of phone calls until finally we located volunteers to go down and give her a ride and walk her into and out of the polls. And actually, in my wallet, I still keep the piece of paper that has her name and phone number on it from when we wrote it down in the office, because it's something that I
It was an amazing
remember.
election.
Yep, it was. And I'll never forget riding back with you in the car later that night after the victory party and hearing on the radio that Barack Obama had been reelected. So you and I have been together for a whole lot of those things. But so all these experiences come together, and
now you've got the bug.
I've got the bug, but I don't know what I want to do with it or not. I don't know if I want to be the guy behind the scenes helping elect the candidate I believe in, or if I'm the candidate that I believe in.
Right.
So I come home from college. It's 2014, about to be 2015, and a good family friend, Marty Morrison, who lives across the street from me,
right across the street.
had been on the school committee for 12 years.
Yep.
4 terms, had done some great work. Our education in Marshfield is the way it is because of Marty.
Yeah.
And the work that she had done with others, of course, but she played no small role.
No.
She came over to the house one night for dinner, and she said, "Hey, listen, I'm not running for school committee again. I think you should think about it."
See, one thing, if you're in politics, you got to learn, be careful of the people who come over for dinner.
That's it. That's when you get sucked in. So I thought about it with my family and my friends and my loved ones, and of course included Marty in the whole conversation as well. Reached out to you, reached out to a couple other people, and decided to run for school committee. I was 22 years old.
And you ran for school committee.
And I did it. And Marshfield had not elected somebody that age in the history of our town. And it was an undertaking that I was a little nervous about because I didn't want to be perceived as overly eager or as too ambitious. But I think once I hit the ground on the campaign trail, I think people picked up on the fact really quickly that all I want to do is help.
Right. Now we had some real issues too.
We did. Absolutely. As soon as I was elected, it was of course you remember a hotly contested election.
Right.
2 seats up. Another entrenched 12-year incumbent who ended up bowing out of the race.
Right.
And then, it was 3 of us for 2 seats, very, very hotly contested. We knocked on a lot of doors for that, too. And literally, my first week, we were in transition. We had an interim superintendent.
Right.
The committee before us, under Marty's leadership, had hired a new superintendent who, to this day, is fantastic and is one of the best superintendents in the state.
Marshfield schools are no joke.
No, absolutely. We are getting better and better every year. And we're very proud of that. Obviously a big part of that is our superintendent, Jeff Granatino, is fantastic. He's provided a lot of great leadership. We've started to look a lot more at social emotional learning, implementing that in our schools, and just moving Marshfield schools forward and making sure we're meeting the needs of our students.
Now, there was a major innovation, all day kindergarten.
Yes, so that's something that I heard constantly about on the campaign trail in 2014 and 15. Parents are very concerned that their kids are going to start falling behind. We offered great half-day kindergarten in Marshfield as it was, but it had got to a point where over 80% of 87% of school districts in Massachusetts had full-day kindergarten, and Marshfield did not. We offered it, but you had to pay $3,000,
which is
per
not
student, especially for
a working family
or a single mother. And we even started to look at the school. Obviously, enrollment in full-day kindergarten rose every year when it was optional. The last year before we announced that we were implementing it, it was, I think, 86 or 85% of students were voluntarily enrolled, and then registration for the next year showed 91%.
So to be clear, this wasn't just a, hey, school committee votes. You had to go before the town and actually do an initiative.
This was a years-long process.
So you've seen some campaigns.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And you know what? That's another kind of campaign, and you know the issues campaigns very well too. But that's one of those things where we heard about it so much when Kendra Campbell and I were both elected together in 2015. We heard so much about it from parents, from concerned community members, that we knew we'd have to start looking at it right away, which we did. And the turnover after we were elected is even just in the 4 years that I've been on the school committee, the only person who's got more tenure on the school committee now is Rich Greer, who's only been on a year longer than me. So we went from having Marty Morris and Nancy Curry, Carol Schran, Dennis Scollins, all these people
who shaped education for at least a decade.
They had over 50 years of combined experience on the school committee. Within 3 years, they all left. So that campaign had consequences too, not just putting somebody like me and somebody like Kendra on the school committee, but now we've got a whole different board. And that's a good thing. The turnover is a good thing. And
so you go from school committee. What's your next move?
So we look at these initiatives and we try and do something good. We're so proud that we were able to get full day kindergarten, like you alluded to. We went to town meeting. We had to.
You had to run an issues campaign.
We did. We had to convince people to come out and support the annual town budget, which had our proposal for full day kindergarten. It passed overwhelmingly.
Which, if you've never been to a town meeting, do not go to Marshfield's town meeting as your first town meeting. Because we're crazy.
Well, then, maybe you could go for your first one, because then everything else after that will be a little less crazy by comparison. We've got a very active citizenry. People are concerned, and you know what? Marshfield practices the most pure form of democracy in the entire world.
One vote, one person.
Exactly. Open town meeting is an amazing thing when you think about it.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it. So I'm weird because I love going to it.
Yeah, I do
it's
too.
one of those things that I just love. The debates, the conversations.
It's great. It's great.
So after you do you're still on school committee, you then, our town chair retires.
Yes, our town Democratic chair retired. And
we'll talk about more detail about that in a few minutes.
Sure.
But that's the next in line?
Yeah, so, I ended up taking the chairmanship of the school committee, which I did for almost 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
Which was a lot of fun. It was a great, position for me to lend my skill set to and work with my fellow members on the school committee and try and build consensus with them. They're a great group. We have a great group on the school committee. It's fantastic. It couldn't be better. There's disagreement, and that's a good thing. But we all work well together, and we all genuinely like each other. So I served as chair of the school committee. I got reelected to the school committee. Thank you again to the people of Marshfield for sending me back to that. It's a lot of fun being in the schools and getting to see how we're educating our kids. But you're right, is when Michael Moresco, who had been the longtime chair of the Democratic Town Committee here in Marshfield, took the position of town administrator.
He can't hold a position for a political party.
Exactly, so he had to step down. And that created a void of leadership for our Democratic Town Committee.
Which I think you're the youngest chair we ever elected, right?
I think so. I don't know for sure. But I think that, looking back on who I know had done it, I think you'd be right. But I had spoken with a couple of members. They urged me to do it. I wasn't really thinking about it that much, but I kind of looked at it and I'm one of these people that I've been active in politics, as you said, for a long time, but I was encouraged to get even more involved, if possible, when Donald Trump was elected president. I will never forget that sinking feeling in my stomach. So when that happened, I decided to, continue to be involved with Democratic campaigns and support Democrats I believe in. And I think that was really the thing that convinced me to
take up
run for the chairmanship of the party. It's we need people to combat the vitriol that's coming from the Oval Office.
So we'll talk in more detail about that, but the chairs are basically the support structure of these town committees.
Yep.
Then our state rep retires.
Yes. Our state rep
for office.
I don't think you can say retires because he's
he's never going to retire.
I never thought that he could be any busier than he was as a state rep.
Right.
That nobody worked harder than Jim Cantwell. But now with his new position as chief of staff for Ed Markey in Massachusetts, it's amazing to see how hard that man works. So I don't think we can say retired, but he left after 10 years of service. And, again, I spoke with my family after Jim made his announcement, and, the news kind of shocked a lot of people.
Right, because he has been there for 10 years.
He has, and he's a staple in the community, and people trust him, people love him. So it was surprising for everybody, I think, and so it kind of caught us all off guard, and I sat down with my family and I said, this opportunity is here. I'm thinking about it, and, I'm 26.
Let's be clear, he's done this all before he's 30.
Yeah, sure. The hairline is over 30, though. I sat down with my family, I talked to a couple of my friends, and it all went like a whirlwind. I announced 2 days after the news came down about Jim
stepping down,
because if something feels right to you, you just have to act on it.
Run for it.
So I decided to pursue the seat, and a lot of challenges presented itself there, but it's an experience I wouldn't trade for the world.
And highest turnout Marshfield and Situate, which are in the district, have ever seen.
That's right. My friend Pat Kearney, who was my opponent in the primary, and then we had almost 7,000 people came out and voted in our primary.
So that's roughly double.
Yeah, a typical turnout is you're right, about 3,500.
Right.
Maybe 4,000. So we had a great turnout.
Right.
Pat and I always like to talk about the fact that we had more people come out to vote for us than came out to vote in Barack Obama versus Hillary Clinton in 2000.
Biggest election we've ever had.
It's astounding, but it just goes to show the impact that organizing can have, and that two passionate candidates can have when they.
And you guys are about the same age, right?
Yes, we're just 2 years apart. I think 3 years apart. My favorite thing to say on the campaign trail was that combined, we were not as old as Jim Cantwell. And that, it's a funny line, and that's usually the response, but it also goes to show young people are starting to come into play and to show up and to get involved. And so when I of course, almost 7,000 people vote, and I lose by just a handful of votes. It ended up
under 100.
I did very well in my community. Right. Pat did very well in his community, and just one of those things. And when that happened, I thought long and hard about what I wanted to do. I had gotten to know Pat over the campaign.
Right.
I knew some of the other candidates
too.
Well,
on the campaign trail, the opposing candidate, especially at state rep, state senator, you see them all the time.
Yeah, and you know what? They're kind
especially in the primary.
They're kind of the only other person who knows what you're going through.
Right, exactly.
It's a lot of pressure that you put on yourself.
Right.
I learned so much from it. It's the single most experience I've learned the most from.
And you had worked on a lot of campaigns before that.
I had, and even I didn't know what to expect fully as a candidate.
Right.
I'm glad I did it because it was a great experience. But I gotten to know the other candidates too. Everybody who ran, I think, is a good person with good intentions. Right. But I made the decision to support Pat,
right?
In part because he's like me. He's a young person who wants to get involved and make their voice heard. I think that's a good thing. Yeah. So I supported Pat. Glad to see he's there now. Just recently sworn in as our state rep.
2 weeks ago?
Last week. Last week. So, and of course, I'm back working at the State House. I'm working for Bruce Ayers again, the rep from Quincy, and be interesting to see how things go this legislative session. But it's
got
good
a lot of tough issues on them.
Yeah, and Pat and I were just talking the other day about how he's up there, I'm up there for Bruce, and there's a handful, 3 or 4 other aides in the building. People who work there are from Marshfield or Situate. So in just our little district alone, about just our two towns,
Plymouth.
yeah, there's like 6 or 7 people who work in the legislature, and they're all young.
Right.
They're all people who are of a certain age, and that's a really good thing.
So this podcast is about people who run for office for the first time and people who run campaigns for people for the first time. You just finished a race.
Yes.
Let's look at it from the point of view of somebody who is thinking of running for office.
Okay.
What advice, where do you start? What's your first building block?
The absolute first step, number 1, don't make a single decision until you sit down with your family and your loved ones, your spouse if you've got one, your parents, your siblings, your best friends. You and I were talking a little bit before. It's sometimes as somebody who's really interested in politics and who believes that they can make a difference, you kind of get tunnel vision every now and then. You think that you're the right candidate for the role, and then all of a sudden you're off to the races and you're planning exactly what's going to. You're 5-6 steps ahead of yourself. You need to take a step back and you need to talk to these people who know you well, because they're going to be able to bring things up to you that you might have not thought of. Right. And not only that, these are the people that are going to be your team.
100%. It's your family and your close friends are going to be the backbone of your organization.
That's right. My parents, I just have to say, my parents, my grandmother, who is in her mid-70s, and my best friend were some of the people who gave countless hours to my campaign. They always show up, they don't go home. Exactly. I'll give my best friend, who's been my best friend since I was 9 years old, slept in his car the night before the election in Scituate to make sure that no kids or pranksters or whoever stole our signs or did anything like that, stole our tables or our tents. This is valuable equipment, slept in his car, woke up at 5:30, 5:45 that morning, drove to our campaign office and knocked on doors and did door hangers until polls closed. Took a break for lunch. That's it.
And a blood transfusion.
He probably needed one. It's astounding to see, the number one thing that I'll always remember about my state rep campaign is just how much I realized how lucky I am to have these people in my life.
The volunteers are
It's
incredible.
Amazing. And
making huge sacrifices for your rights.
Exactly. And it would be unfair for any candidate for office to make a decision without factoring these people's opinions in. My parents my dad joked when the campaign was over that this was the worst summer of his life because he didn't have a summer.
Right. No, it's just nonstop.
He wasn't going to the beach on his days off. Right. He was holding signs or knocking doors or carting me around
doing
so I could knock on doors quicker.
Right.
My mom is the same exact way. I mean, she didn't have a summer. Right. And they give it up like that, though.
So there's 2 parts to that conversation. 1, making sure they do the reality check.
Yes, absolutely.
2, making sure that you have the conversation about the level of commitment that is going to be required.
That's right. It's not just you running for office. It's your name on the ballot, but it's a whole lot of people behind you.
And you joked about them giving up their summer, but literally that's what you're going to do.
They did. We live in Wrexham.
Right.
We are a 4-minute walk from the beach.
You can smell the ocean from his front.
I think my dad.
Unlike Sarah Palin, it's not Russia.
Yeah, right. That's right. That's right. I think my dad went to the beach 3 times this summer.
It's a huge commitment.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've had that talk.
So that's number 1. You have to sit down with these people.
Sit down with your family members, your friends. Talk about what you're thinking of doing. This is before you announce.
Yes, and just as importantly, you have to determine whether or not. And this is one of the hard things that you have to do is you look at it through a lens of kind of cross-examining yourself or really...
You've got to do that. You really do.
Are you the right choice for the constituency?
And what problems am I going to have?
Exactly. I mean, are you the right person to represent the constituency, whether it be on school committee, whether it be selectman, whether it be state rep or state senator? I mean, are you the right person for right now, for this moment? That's a hard conversation that you've got to have with yourself. And, we see a lot of candidates run for office because they believe they are. But the stat that we don't know and that we'll never know is how many people almost run, but then don't run because they realize it's not the right time.
So we've had a few people on, and pretty much everyone to a T has said, if you're thinking of running, run.
Yeah.
But first, talk to your family.
Yeah, it's got to be the right thing for your family, your friends, your loved ones, and for you. When I ran for school committee the first time at 22, I had been working at the State House for 6-8 months, and I have a great relationship with my boss. He's a mentor. He's a good friend for life. He's an awesome guy.
A great Massachusetts politician.
He really is. And you and I were talking earlier. He's one of the ones that truly cares.
Right.
But I didn't know him that well when I first started working for him, obviously.
Right.
I think it was even less than 6 months that I had been working for him when I approached him and said, hey, listen, I want to think about running for school committee, but I want to ask you first, is that something that you think I'd be a good fit for? And is it something that you think I can do with the time commitment that you need from me here in Quincy and Randolph, working for you as your legislative director? So that's another step too, is professional obligation.
Right.
Is this right for you now?
Right. Because it is supposed to be a part-time job. It ain't.
That's right. No, absolutely. Running for office is a full-time commitment and then some.
Right.
When I decided to run for rep, we had some stuff going on at the State House. It was about a month before budget session. We had a hand in writing a piece of the Alzheimer's legislation that passed. We had some things going on that I couldn't just leave my boss high and dry on. I had been with him for 4 years. He's a great guy. The district means a lot to me.
Right.
I didn't want to be that guy who just left high and dry and had a new aide come in when they had no idea what they were doing right before all of these important things happened.
Important votes.
So in retrospect, I look at that and I say, I might have thought it was ideal timing for me when I announced.
Right.
But then I look at what happened and, how I stayed at work and how I had to weigh those obligations. And of course, campaign the right way and not campaign, when I'm on.
You have to do it after the hours.
Exactly. I'm a stickler for stuff like that. So it's, something that
the weird thing about it becomes before and after work. So if you're leaving for work at 6 o'clock, you're actually starting working on the campaign at 4, finishing at 6, going to work for 8 to 10 hours because it is the State House, and then getting off work.
And then you sleep for an hour and a half. But you know what? It's obviously I would still make the decision 10 times out of 10 to run for the seat again. If put back in that moment. But it's something that even I.
You got to think about these.
Even
things.
me with my experience working for you and on these campaigns I had done, I didn't even realize. So it's just one of those things.
Okay, so you've had the big talk.
Yep.
Do you put your committee together next?
Yes, that's exactly what you do. So I'll give you my example again. My first race, school committee. Again, 22-year-old kid running for office for a school district that has a $48 million budget. That's a big ask for people.
That's a medium-sized corporation.
You're right. That's a big ask for people to trust a kid fresh out of college with.
Right.
You have to convince people that you know what you're doing, that you're measured. And a lot of the way that people get convinced of that sort of thing is not by what you say at first, although that plays a role later on. It's by who decides to back you early.
So these are made the phone calls to my friends and family.
Yep.
Now I'm making the phone calls to the community leaders and the thought leaders to get them on my committee.
That's right. The people that I've worked with, the people that I trust, the people that I know are well thought of in the community, and bring them together to kind of tell them exactly what you want to do, why you're running, what you want to accomplish. Are you with me?
Right. Can I count on your support?
Yeah. We make fun of him for it, but Jim Cantwell always uses the phrase goodwill ambassador.
Right.
And he's absolutely right. You're an ambassador for your candidate.
You're putting your name on this person.
That's right. That's right.
Which sounds weird, but it's actually
true. It's true. That's exactly what the next step is you call those people, you put together your committee, and you get their advice because, even if you run 100 campaigns in your lifetime,
right,
you're never going to know exactly what to do. Somebody's always going to think.
And every neighborhood has a different issue.
Exactly. It's the name of the game is dealing with people and trying to earn the trust of people. So when you're doing that, it's always going to be unique every single campaign that you run.
Right. You run for school committee, you've run for state rep. If whatever you run for next, you're still going to do the same process of call these community leaders regardless.
Exactly. If I run for office again, that's exactly what it's going to be. I've got to call these people who were so supportive of me the first time around. Even if they didn't support me in one of my runs, still going to call them. They have a stake in the community. You want to call these people. You want to get their thoughts on whether or not you're the right person,
right.
And then you want to ask them for their help. Okay, you've got a whole lot of things to accomplish, and don't make the mistake to think that you can do it alone.
So this is a lot like what Greg Shanahan recommended. Make sure you get local as quick as possible.
Yes.
Anybody in the community that has any kind of following, we're talking PTA, we're talking baseball coaches, football coaches, if there's a knitting circle, you want to immediately reach out to them.
That's, every single group that you can think of. Boys and Girls Club is huge in Marshfield. Chamber of Commerce. Just all these people who do so many wonderful things for the community.
Once again, all volunteers.
That's right.
Okay, so we've got our committee, we've called everyone, we got people on board. Next is your announcement.
Right.
Now, this is a combination press event, fundraiser, and a party.
And it will never, ever feel like it goes smoothly. It's no matter how prepared you are, there is always something that comes up. And that's okay. There's nothing
in
wrong
ways
with
that you didn't expect.
Right.
So, just a side story, Rep Cantwell, when he ran for state rep, we had the kickoff party, and it was huge. Huge amount of people showed up. We then come to find out afterwards, the police who were in charge of the traffic were turning people away. So we were wondering why we were not getting as loud. Well, it's because the police turned people away at the event.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank God that didn't happen to me. So there's always something. It doesn't.
What is your advice for when things go wrong?
Roll with the punches.
Just breathe?
Yeah, just take a step back, breathe. Tell yourself that you've surrounded yourself with good people and that you're running for the right reasons.
And empower them.
Exactly. And people are going to respond the way they see the candidate respond.
Right.
So if you have something happen during your campaign that is something that stresses you out or something that comes up and you don't know exactly how to handle it right away, you just take a step back because you've got volunteers, you've got family, friends, you've got people who believe in you that might not even know you that well, but just believe in what you say, coming to help you. If you're freaking out, they're going to freak out too because they're looking to you.
So what I always point out is you have two people in a campaign that are extremely important. One is the candidate, and the other one is the campaign manager.
Yes.
So the candidate is always the nice, relaxed, breathe, don't worry, we'll get through it. The campaign manager is always the swearing asshole that nobody likes.
Right. You.
Yes. So the reality of the situation is behind the scenes, the campaign is probably the opposite, where the candidate's freaking out, and the campaign manager is saying, calm down.
The campaign manager is definitely the calming source.
But the reality is, forward-facing, your volunteers need to see a calm, actual candidate, but they can't allow it to get laxed, so you need a campaign manager that's going to, after Sean, the candidate, comes in and says, hey, great to see everyone, campaign manager comes in and says, why aren't you knocking doors?
Right.
So it's a kind of dynamic that you need a person in the campaign to counterset you.
Yes, it's a very unique role, and there's no two campaigns where one person will be exactly right for both jobs as campaign manager.
And the biggest mistake that I've seen is candidates that try to be the campaign manager, because it is two distinct problems.
Yes.
When volunteers don't show up, the campaign manager can go and scream at them.
Right.
The candidate can't.
I still wouldn't have the campaign manager scream at them, but
but you know what I'm saying.
Ask them, they're given their time, but just ask them what happened. We're counting on you, and just remind them in a certain way, we're counting on you.
Right.
We need you to do this. We can't do this without you. Have you seen Bird Box yet?
No, I haven't yet.
Okay, well, for those of you who have, there's a scene in Bird Box where Sandra Bullock, camera's directly on her face, and she's got her two kids there, and she's telling them in no uncertain terms, and very forceful, do not take your blindfold off. All these things she's telling them to do.
Right.
That's exactly what a campaign manager needs to do. So if you've seen Bird Box, be Sandra Bullock. When I was running my campaign for rep, I had a whole team of people who were de facto. Each person had a role.
Right.
Including my parents. My poor parents, their number one role was to make sure that things that were unnecessary for me to worry about didn't get to me.
You got to keep that off the plate of the candidate.
Exactly. And there was a structure. People knew, especially in the last couple of months, people knew, don't go to Sean with a problem unless you absolutely need, unless I tell you to. There's a hierarchy.
Because the candidate always needs to be meeting voters.
That's every second that you're not meeting a voter is a second wasted. I had a guy working for my campaign, Galen Schrand, who was phenomenal.
Right.
And part of the reason Galen was so successful for me is because he was organized and he had that ability to keep me calm, but keep me on task and keep everybody else on task and keep things organized in his head. So that's a big part of the reason why he was so successful. The other part is kind of like you said earlier, we connected. Like there's an ease, there's a friendship between the two of us. We still keep in touch. He's a great kid.
Which is why anyone who's ever worked on a campaign knows Trump is full of it when he says he has no idea who his campaign manager was. Don't get me started.
Yeah,
bad candidate
either. Yeah. Bad president.
Bad president. So you do your kickoff, then it's just straight out. Doors, phones, meeting, greeting, shaking hands.
Hit the ground running.
That's it, straight out until you get to election night.
Right.
We never call it a victory party, but you've got to schedule a party for the event. I always say the most important thing to do, thank everyone who helped you.
Yes.
Win or lose, those people only have the social experience. Even if you win the office, you don't have 9,000 jobs to give up.
Right.
So what do you think is important about the last part of the election?
You have to always remember, whether you win or you lose, that feeling of victory or that feeling of coming up short is not just felt by you. People invest in this.
And it's crushing. It's crushing.
It is. You know,
it's exhilarating when it works, but when it loses.
You know, it's, for me, when I won my school committee election, by the time of the election had rolled around, I had turned 23. I was 23 years old. I ran thinking that I would be a good candidate, but not really knowing whether or not I'd have a real shot at winning.
Right.
I topped the ticket. You
got more votes than anyone else.
You were there, and it was a great feeling that I didn't really expect. It wasn't just my victory.
Right.
You know, the number, you hit the nail on the head, is it thank your volunteers.
Right.
You know, these are the people that carry you. These are the people that give up their weekends or their weeknights and come make calls for you, come knock on doors for you.
And it's a weird bunker feeling. When you work on a campaign, it shrinks time. And you form some relationships that are incredible.
Oh, God. There are a group of people, like I said, that worked on my rep campaign that I still keep in touch with, that I will forever be grateful for. They hold a special place in my heart. There's 4 or 5 women who were so phenomenal for me. Galen, I mentioned. Of course, my parents, my grandmother, like I said. I was just on the phone with Deb Cornwall today.
Oh, wow.
Deb was like instrumental.
Who's now your treasurer?
Yes, she's the treasurer of the Democratic Town Committee. That's right. And she was full-time campaign staff, essentially. Didn't get paid for it, but she believed in me and believed in the message that I spread. And that's touching. That's something that I'll never forget.
So here's our problem. There's a lot more we need to talk about. I want to talk about youth and government.
Okay.
I do want to talk about the DTC stuff too, the Democratic Town Committee, if you don't know. We've got 10 minutes.
Okay.
Let's talk about youth and government. I think this is a huge program because you, as running for a state rep who is in his 20s, bring a totally new perspective. Patrick as well. This is a changing dynamic.
Yes.
That's happening right now. It
is.
Talk about the youth and government program.
First of all, how awesome is it that it's a changing dynamic?
It is. It's incredible.
I mean, we've got these young
we
people.
talk about it, but it's actually really happening.
I love when young people run for office.
In fact, you took my neighbor to D.C.
I did.
Yes.
Yeah,
So tell us about youth and government.
So I've been involved with youth and government. My God, I participated in youth and government, which for folks who don't know, probably the majority of you, youth and government is run through the YMCA of Massachusetts. It's a model government program. We have groups from across the state.
So every town?
Yeah, not every town.
Most towns.
But a lot of towns. We have, a few hundred kids that participate every year. We train them throughout the course of the year at weekly or biweekly meetings at our local level. We have 4 Saturday meetings for the statewide program at different colleges.
Okay.
And then it culminates in March when we go to the State House for a 3-day conference where they get to stay at a hotel in Boston and they actually sit in the real-life House and Senate chambers and debate bills that they've written on issues that they think need to be changed in Massachusetts.
So just to sum up, kids decide they want to do this.
Yep. Kids
get involved.
High school, 9 through 12.
They get involved at the high school.
Yep.
You have a year-long program.
Yep.
They then go to the State House and write their own bills.
They do. And they not only write their own bills, they present them in a committee-style format and debate them with each other. And then they vote on whether or not they pass or fail. It's a whole set. We elect a youth governor every year as the leader of our statewide program. We elect the Speaker of the House to preside over
the whole
House.
process.
Exactly. It's really it restores my faith every time I get a little down. It just restores my faith in that, even with somebody who I believe is not a competent president, somebody who I believe is damaging to democracy in the United States. Even when they, even when we see this happening every day, I still am not at all worried about the future of America, because I do things with youth and government.
And you see these,
and I see what these kids bring to the table, and I see the passion that they have for making a difference at such an early age.
Right.
I did youth and government in high school. I participated all 4 years through high school. When I graduated, my advisor at the time came to me and he said, "I'd like you to stay on as college staff." He knew I was going to Stonewall.
Right.
He said, "I want you to stay on as college staff." This man changed my life, and I had to say yes. I couldn't say no. My mentor, and he passed away a few years after that, and that's when I took the delegation over. So I'm the advisor now for the Marshfield Club, and I have 60 kids.
And you went to D.C., right?
I do. So every year I also go to Washington, D.C. with the 8th grade. Our entire 8th grade at Furnace Brook Middle School does a field trip to Washington, D.C. They ask a school committee member or two to come along. I've gone every year that I've been on the school committee. It's a blast. I love getting to know the kids that they pair me with. They give every chaperone 8 kids. It's just an amazing thing. And a lot of those kids end up joining youth and government,
right.
Which is great. We're nonpartisan, so I have kids who are Democrats, I have kids who are Republicans, everything in between, everything you could think of, and that's great.
Now, what I understand is the debates are serious.
They are. These kids are smarter than me.
Right.
These kids are smarter than a ton of people up on Beacon Hill, and people on Beacon Hill would say that to you too. They do. These kids are amazing. But the thing that's the most amazing about these issues-based debates that they have, and like I said, they're on every side of the aisle.
Right.
It's respectful.
Right.
It's the exact opposite of Washington, D.C.
Basically, what you're telling me is the children behave better than the paid professionals.
They do. And that's why it gives me hope for the future, because these kids are exchanging ideas respectfully. And they're the ones that are going to run for office. They're the ones that are going to be working for congressmen or U.S. senators.
And making the government work.
That's right. And
at this point, not getting paid.
I think we'll look back 100 years from now, at this point in U.S. history, I think it's a low point for us. These kids are going to make it the high point when they're older. They're going to come in and they're going to remember that experience they had and how they learned to respectfully exchange ideas.
So if a high school kid wants to get involved, just see their guidance counselor, or where do they go?
So if a high school kid in Marshfield wants to get involved, they can email me directly. It's Sean.Costello at mpsd.org.
I'll put that in the show notes for people.
Thank you. That's my school email address. It's a job I've done now since 2010. So this is my 9th year volunteering. I'm on the board for the statewide program. It's just a wonderful, wonderful program. And like I said, all are welcome. I never push my own political opinions on kids. I think that'd be wrong for me to do that in this position. There are kids that I disagree with on almost everything they say.
But you still got to love that they're involved.
Exactly. And as long as they're respectfully airing their viewpoint, it's fine by me.
So if you're not in Marshfield, what do you do?
If you're not in Marshfield, you can still email me because
you're on the board. You'll find a way to get them.
And I can get them in touch with an advisor, or if they're interested in starting a group at their high school, I can help them with that too.
You'd love to have them help.
Absolutely.
So we still haven't talked about DTC. We'll talk about that later.
Yes.
Last 2 questions. First question is, what is your advice for somebody who's thinking of doing this?
My advice for somebody who's thinking about running for office.
Or running a campaign. I'm pretty idealistic, and I think I'd say to people, having worked in politics on campaigns for a long time, campaigns that we've talked about, campaigns that we haven't talked about, having worked at the State House, there are 2 kinds of people that work in campaigns. One is a kind who do it because it's a thrill. They love to play games and they love to win.
Then there's the people who do it because they believe in a candidate, or they believe in an ideal, or they have something that they want to see happen, and that they'll give everything they can, mind, body, and soul, to make this a reality.
Right.
Don't be the former. Be the latter.
Be the passion.
Be the person who wants to get involved and wants to work for a candidate or for yourself or for an issue because you believe in it. So don't do it because you want to win. Don't
the important
do it
thing to understand about that advice is you're gonna lose.
Yes.
There are times you will lose, and it will suck, and it makes a world of difference when you lose for a reason.
John Walsh said that to me years and years ago after I worked on a lieutenant governor's campaign as field director that we didn't win. He told me his whole story about how he had run campaign after campaign, and he lost almost every one of them.
Right.
And then he found a guy named Deval Patrick who wanted to run for governor. So it's not about the ones that you lose.
Completely changed the way campaigns work.
That's right. If you watch The West Wing,
Yeah.
Toby Ziegler said the same exact thing in a bar one day when he was talking to a woman who asked him if he was good. He said yes, and then he proceeded to tell her he'd lost every election. Win or lose, it matters how you run the campaign.
Right.
Don't be the person that does it because it's a game to you and you want to prove that you're smarter than everybody else.
Right.
Do it because you want to see good things happen.
believe
You're
in the
not.
mission.
It's not a game. It's people's lives.
Right.
It's moving our country, our society forward. Everybody in politics plays a role in that in public life. It's not a game.
Right.
It's serious business.
And it matters.
That's right. And we need idealism. We need people with stars in their eyes
Right.
to get into politics. We need those people. We don't need the people that want to do it for their own benefit.
Last question.
Yes.
Best campaign you ever worked on?
My state rep campaign.
Why?
The people. I knocked on thousands of doors. We, as a campaign, we interacted with over 10,000 residents behind those doors.
Right.
I personally walked 475 miles over the course of the campaign.
There's a joke out there about shoe leather.
Yeah.
But it's true. What you're going to see is if you have a candidate that's really knocking doors, look at the soles of their feet.
That's right.
Because they will burn through, how many shoes you go through?
2 pairs of shoes.
2 pairs of shoes. And they're not cheap shoes. They're real
Well, yeah,
$100, $200
look good when you're knocking
yeah.
on doors. But it's an endeavor. It's something that you take on, and it's a serious thing. So I know it's we talked about it a whole lot during this broadcast, and that's great. But that's obviously my clear answer is I will never forget the people that I met.
How hard they worked for you.
The people that I got to know even better. And my family, my friends, my loved ones who stepped up for me. There are just moments that I will hold dear for the rest of my life. That's a great thing. Even on campaigns that I lost, I'll always be grateful for the opportunity to work on Jim's campaigns.
Right.
When I worked for Mike Lake for lieutenant governor, I
Right.
worked with some great people. We had a lot of fun. We didn't win, but we had a lot of fun. I'll always remember that.
Right.
Working with you and with Chris Matthews, 2 great people. Those are things that I'll always remember. I will never forget the feeling of my first victory when I won my first school committee election. That's something I'll always hold on to. But if I'm singling out my favorite campaign, state rep, second to none.
Second to none. So what I've noticed is it's always an A and a B.
Mm-hmm.
My 2 favorites, A1, B1.
Yeah.
So, Sean, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, John.
So we got to have Sean back because we haven't talked about the town committee.
Okay.
You're now the chair of the Marshfield Democratic Town Committee. We got a lot of stuff coming up.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of good things coming up with that, too. There's a
So
whole lot of
looking at-
initiatives that I'd love to talk about, too.
So we'll have you back on. That's about a 2 to 4 year term that you're going to be doing.
Yes,
for that?
yep. So
we'll
I'm
definitely
filling a
have you-
term through 2020, and we'll see what happens after that.
See what happens?
It's a great job. I love doing it.
So once again, this is the podcast. Please go to bose3.com/subscribe. We got a lot of great candidates coming up. I got a lot of campaign managers coming up, local organizers. Please make sure you subscribe. We ran a little bit long, but we did because
Sorry,
we had great conversation.
It's me. I talk.
He ran for office. Of course, he talks. So, Sean, thank you again.
Of course, thank you.
And we will see you at the next podcast.
You have been listening to the Bose 3 podcast. Show notes are available at bose3.com. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the campaign trail.